All right, I think I'm recording. All right, we are in Revelation chapter 5 today. For those of you who are not keeping up, you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're not moving.
You're
You're not
frozen.
moving.
Well, it takes a second after it's recording.
Oh,
It
okay.
always takes a few minutes for some reason. I don't know why.
Warm up.
Let me know when I'm moving.
There you
go.
All right, Revelation chapter 5. So just to remind you, so Revelation 4 and 5 are both kind of introductions to what we're going to get into in chapter 6 with the tribulation, etc. Ooh, I'm getting a weird feedback now. Oh, it disappeared. Okay. Anyway, so in chapter 4, if you remember, we saw the John's vision of the throne room. We got a lot of details into what he saw there: the throne, the vision of God, the crystal everywhere, the rainbow over his head, the 24 elders, the 4 living creatures, the 7 lamps of fire, the whole business. So you need to have that picture in your head as we get into chapter 5, because it's kind of a continuation of the story as we get into chapter 5. So let me just read verse 1 and then we'll comment on it. It says, "And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals." So here in chapter 4, if you will, you saw this picture of God, that we had, and here in chapter 5, you start seeing God doing something. You see him reaching out his right hand, and in his right hand he has this scroll. So again, him who sat on the throne. In case it's not clear that we are talking about God at this point in chapter 5. So you have this scroll, and it's sealed with 7 seals. So this is typical of what they did in that era with regard to legal documents, if you will, that they were sealed like this. And what it means by 7 seals is they would roll it a little ways, and then they would seal it, and then they would roll it some more, and they would seal it again, then they would roll it some more and seal it again. So that when you opened it, you would open it, and then you would get to another seal, and then you would open it and get to another seal, etc. So the 7 seals are built on each other. But again, this is very typical of the kind of sealing they would do for contracts and documents at that period of time. You notice that it says it was written on the inside and on the back. Again, what they would do, because it was rolled up, they would write on the outside, if you would, kind of a summary. What is this scroll about, so that they would know, who should open it, and what a summary of the contents would be written on the outside. So for them to say it was written on the inside and on the back or on the outside, that's what they're referring to there. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the scroll. What is the scroll? Because obviously it's the key to understanding the whole rest of the book is the scroll. So I actually want to go back to Jeremiah chapter 32. Jeremiah 32:7. There's a story here. I'm not going to read the whole story. Just give you an introduction to it. If you want to go back and study it sometime, it's an interesting story. We'll begin at verse 7.
32:7.
Jeremiah 32:7. So now that the Wilsons are here, we can start. Sorry, you got to get some abuse.
Absolutely. We just heard Pastor saying on the way in that we're supposed to harass each other.
All right, 32:7.
Laugh.
I missed that one. All right, you with me? Jeremiah 32:7. Mine says, "Behold, Hanamel, the son of Shalem, your uncle, will come to you, saying, Buy my field, which is in Anathoth, for the right of redemption is yours to buy. So let me give you a little background to the story. So Jeremiah, if you remember, was a prophet before before they were taken away into Babylon. So here is kind of right before that. If you go back up into the first couple of verses here in chapter 32, you'll see that they're already under siege by the Babylonians. They're in Jerusalem, but they're under siege by the Babylonians. And at this time, Hanamel, who is Jeremiah's cousin, as you can see there, comes to him and asks him to buy a field. So first of all, it's kind of bizarre that he would do that. The Babylonians are about to take over the whole country. And Jeremiah knows this. He's been prophesying about the Babylonians coming for some time. But his cousin comes and says, "Hey, I want you to buy this field." And you know that within a very short period of time, the Babylonians are going to take over the whole area. So it's kind of a little bit bizarre that he would ask him to buy this field. But anyway, keep going. Verse 8, Then Hanamel, my uncle's son, came to me in the court of the prison according to the word of the Lord. And he said to me, "Please buy my field that is in Anathoth, which is in the country of Benjamin, for the right of inheritance is yours and the redemption yours. Buy it for yourself." And then I knew that this was the word of the Lord. So I bought the field from Hanamel, the son of my uncle, who was in Anathoth, and weighed out to him the money, 17 shekels of silver. And I signed the deed and sealed it and took witnesses and weighed the money on the scales. So I took the purchase deed, both that which was sealed according to the law and customs and that which was open. So the only thing I want to get out of this at this point, well, let me say two things. First of all, it's just you can see here you have this contract for buying the land, and they seal it. They have witnesses that sign it and seal it. So again, just kind of giving you this was kind of a normal practice. I will say what's interesting about this story is that he buys this field knowing that they're going into captivity. And the whole point really is, go down to verse 15. It says, "For thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, houses and fields and vineyards shall be possessed again in this land." It was kind of a promise by God that they would return. Yes, they were going to be taken away to Babylon, but they would return. And Jeremiah purchasing this field was kind of a trusting in God that they would return, and that field would belong to him again. Belong to his, would be an inheritance to his family, because he's not alive when they come back. But it's inheritance to his family. So he's buying this deed, he's sealing it up, and it's an inheritance to his family. So it's a little bit of a type for what we're going to talk about here in a minute. So the second place I want you to go is to Ezekiel chapter 2. Ezekiel chapter 2, again, go to Daniel, turn left. So you go to Jeremiah, turn right. Ezekiel chapter 2, verse 9. So here again, we've turned to Ezekiel quite a bit as we've looked at Revelation, because Ezekiel also has a vision of heaven. And then we see in verse 9, it's very similar to what we're reading here in Revelation. So Ezekiel 1:9, it says, "Now when I looked, there was a hand stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. And then he spread it before me, and there was writing on the inside and on the outside, and written on it were lamentations and mourning and woe." So again, this is the same scroll that we talk about here in Revelations. It's handed. John is able to read the writing on the outside of the scroll, which says lamentations, mourning, and woe. So this is giving them some idea of what's on the inside of the scroll. It's lamentations, mourning, and woe. This is a tough scroll, as you know, and as we'll see as we open it in chapter 6 and following. But here you see the same scroll, and what is written on the outside gives, again, is a summary of what's on the inside, and that is lamentations, mourning, and woe. The other place I want to show you is go back to Daniel, because we've seen this scroll before in Daniel chapter 12. Daniel chapter 12 and verse 4. So, so let me just pause before we read that and say, as we think back on Daniel. Daniel is a prophecy of the future, and in that prophecy, if you remember, not only does it talk about the near history, with the Romans and all the people that were going to come in and conquer them in the near term, but it also talks about the far term, i.e., when Jesus comes back. And so this whole prophecy that Daniel has, when he gets to chapter 12, verse 4. It says, "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and the knowledge shall increase." Let me keep going. It says, Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on the river bank and the other on the river bank, on the other river bank. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, "How long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be?" Then I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, when he has held up his right hand, his left hand to heaven, and swore to heaven, who lives forever, that shall be for a time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. So I just wanted to remind you of that section of Daniel that we read. A couple things in there. First of all, you see in verse 4 that this book, the prophecy that Daniel has, is sealed up. The scroll is sealed up there. This is the same prophecy. It's the same scroll. It's sealed up until later. And this later, if you notice in verse 4, right, many will run to and fro, and the knowledge will increase. So this is when the scroll is opened, and people start freaking out, going, what's going on? What's happening? And they're able to read the scroll and find out this is exactly what God said would happen. So that's what I mean. Knowledge has increased. And then finally, you'll notice that in verse 7 in verse 7, right, it talks about the timing of this, right? So this is the 3.5 years again, the times, and half a time. That was 3.5 years. So this is, again, the Great Tribulation, the second half of the tribulation. And then it ends with the holy people has been completely shattered. Then all these things will be finished. So after this Great Tribulation and everyone is crushed, then all of this is done. So again, this is the scroll that's being talked about then when we get back to Revelation. Do you remember what we said the scroll was back in Daniel? You remember we talked about it being the little book and the scroll? Don't look back. We said this was the title deed to the earth. Right. This showed ownership of the earth. This scroll. This whole thing was a statement about ownership. So heretofore, Satan has taken over control of the earth. Right. It's become the earth has come under the captivity of Satan. We've got the creation groaning. We've got men and sin. Right. Satan is in charge, but God actually has the official title to the earth. And here he is now presenting that title forward. He's bringing it forward, saying, "Here's the title," and then we get into the questions about who can open it. But that's what the scroll is. It's the title deed to the earth, if you will, or to all creation. And then when it's unrolled, it's not a description of the earth. It's actually a description of how he will take it back, how he will take back the earth. How he will take back his rightful possession, if you will. So that's what the scroll is that we have in front of us, and we'll obviously get a lot more detail as we get into it, but that's generally what we're talking about. Any comments on that, questions on that? You got it? Okay, so let's go on into verse 2, into the interesting part of this. So then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals?" So then you have the strong angel stepping forward. And who is the strong angel?
Gabriel?
Yeah, so nobody really knows. There's a lot of folks who say Gabriel because the word Gabriel actually means strength of God. So when you say a strong angel, they often go and go to Gabriel as the one who's doing this. We don't really know who it is. But that's that's often who is talked about. So you see some strong angel, he proclaiming with a loud voice, right? And it's a loud voice because he wants everyone in creation to hear this proclamation, as we'll see as we get into it. He wants everyone to hear, so it's being done with a very loud voice, a very strong angel. It's all to let you know that this is something projected across all of creation. And he says, who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seals? All right, so this is a very important question because we get into worthy over and over and over as we get into chapter 5. What does it mean, who is worthy? Well, let me put it this way. What does it mean, who is worthy?
Who has the power?
Righteous?
Or the-
I think that question is more down in verse 3. It says that no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll. So there's about ability there in verse 3. But in verse 2, he's really talking about worthiness. What is that about?
Maybe, yeah, authority or appointment or
Righteousness.
righteousness, who God has sinless, I don't want to say ordained, but
I think you're on the right track, Debbie. Now, who is qualified? Who is, and it really comes down to he's handing off this scroll, which is the deed to the land, to his inheritance, if you will, right, to the rightful heir. He's handing it off, this scroll. So he's looking for the one who is the rightful heir, the one to whom the inheritance belongs. So this is about character. This is about the character of the person, not about the ability of the person. It's about the character. He's looking for the divine progeny, if you will. He's looking for that one who is worthy, and we'll get into why he's worthy as we get into the rest of this chapter. But he's looking for someone who has the right character, who has the right position, who is actually worthy to open this. And then you see, as we said, as we see in verse 3, and no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. So there's really two criteria for someone to step forward. The first is worthiness, and then the second is ability. In other words, who is, as we open the scroll, there's a lot of things that have to be done. There's a lot of things that happens. And so you really need someone who is able to carry those things out, right? He's got to be someone who's mighty enough, someone who can throw out Satan, someone who can destroy sinners, someone who can reverse the curse of creation, to wipe out the demon power, to obliterate sin. So who has that kind of power? Who has that ability, right? So he's looking for those two things. When the angel proclaims in a loud voice, who is worthy and who is able to look on these scrolls and to open these scrolls, I don't know what word that was, scrolls. He's looking at that word, something between scones and scrolls, something there. Anyway, he's looking for both of those things. Now, you got to remember that we're here in heaven, right? And everyone is there. All the angels are there. And you got Gabriel maybe making the song, making this statement. You've got the 4 living creatures who are there. You got all of the saints of the Old Testament. Moses is hanging out there. Abraham is sitting in the background. You got the New Testament saints, right? You got Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and all those guys, and none of them, no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll. No one was worthy. No one was able. So this isn't like, if Russell was there, he could say, well, I'm here. I'll be glad to do it, right? Sorry, Russell. I think sometimes we go, well, if I was there, I would have stepped forward. Don't be such an idiot, right? I mean, none of us. No one, none of the angels, none of the saints, no one is able to do it. No one in heaven and earth was worthy or able to open the scroll or even to look at it, right? To even look and see what was written on the outside. It's kind of amazing, an amazing statement. All right, so let's look at verse 4 then. And so I wept much. So who is I? John, right? Yeah, just to remind you. So I wept much because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. So John here, the wept much, I don't know what your translation, but this is a very strong statement. He was broken down to the point of not being able to stop crying. I mean, he could not stop weeping. He just kept continually, he was crushed by this. So I got to ask you the question, why is he crying? Why is he so upset? And don't say because no one would open the scroll. So why is John upset? Why is he weeping? What's he sad about?
No one was worthy.
Yeah, right. That's what I said. Don't say, Russell. Don't just repeat. Why is that upsetting to him?
It's because it can't continue on. If that can't be open,
What's the point?
yeah, nothing can progress. The prophecies won't happen.
What won't happen? I'm sorry.
The prophecy.
The prophecy. What prophecy is that?
Yeah, now open the can of worms. What's going to be up to Revelation? Christ won't return. All those things because no one's there to open it and continue the process, if you will.
Maybe it's more about him realizing the unworthiness of himself and all of humanity, even the angels in heaven, and the sinfulness and the lack of ability. Maybe that's what's just, that's just a bitter weeping when you have that realization. No?
I think that's part of it, but I actually think that Mr. Wilson was on the right track. Yeah, you can move to the table now.
You can have my seat, brother.
No, so I think we are exactly seeing here. He recognizes that if this scroll is not taken, and the seals are not broken, and then all the things that are going to take place because of that are not going to happen, including salvation, right? Including going to heaven. I mean, the new kingdom, the new Jerusalem, all that stuff is not just the tribulation is not going to happen, but all the things that follow the tribulation are not going to happen. Everything that has been promised is not going to happen if the scroll is not open. I think that, but to my mind has gone blank on your name, who spoke, and I said you were wrong. Karen, thank you. But I think we also have to take into account Karen's point, because I think what you've got here is John is representing all of mankind here in his response. It's all of the tears of mankind through the ages are being represented by John in him breaking down here. The heartache of sin that you're now going to be stuck in, the heartache of all the things that have happened to you that you thought God was going to fix, that you thought God was going to take care of. Death is not going to be taken care of, right? All of the people that we expect to see, we're not going to see, right? So he's definitely representing all of the tears of mankind that have been beaten for sin over the centuries are being represented by John here. And Satan's going to continue to reign. Sin's going to reign in, forever because this has not been, because no one has been found to open the scroll. And the other thing, just in the midst of this, say the word "found" there is a legal term. So no one is found. In other words, they did a check. They looked to see who was worthy and who was able, and they didn't find anyone. They did the right amount of looking to try to find out. John wanted to see sin done away with. He wanted to see Satan bound. He wanted to see Christ exalted. He wanted to see the kingdom of God. He wanted to see all those things That had been promised, as we've already said. Now, I just got to say, right here before we go on to verse 5 is, do you ever feel this way that John felt, right? Do you ever feel like, man, I'm on this Christian island all by myself. There's nobody with me. I think John was like, there's nobody able to open this scroll. There's no way out of this. We are stuck in this awful world, this awful situation with these awful people, and I'm the only one who's trying to do anything right about it. I think that's the kind of situation, that the kind of mental state that John is in right here. And I think I think we often find ourselves in that state also, where we're just going, why am I doing all this? Is it worth it? Is it really going to happen? Is God really going to bring a new heaven to the earth? And I think that's exactly right, that where John is, right in the midst of this situation that he's in right here. So I just want you to recognize yourself in that. Yes, sir.
I got a question. So why are they searching for someone other than Christ to do this? It's kind of a duck. I can do it. I don't understand why the vacuum. Why does not? Well, of course Christ can do it.
Yeah, I think it's a setup statement, right? They're setting us up to that. Obviously, Christ is the one who steps forward here in a few minutes. But I think it's to show that he is the only one who is worthy, right? He's the only one. They search. It's not that. I don't think they were in a real confusion and dilemma over this, but I think it's really to show to us and to all of creation that Christ is the only one worthy and the only one able to do it. I really just think it's a story to show us that. That's all.
And I think part of it is to show the true hopelessness
Of mankind without Christ. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Good question. All right, so let's go to verse 5. So verse 5, but one of the elders said to me, do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals. So first of all, one of the elders said to me, so who are the elders? Who are the elders?
One of the 24 that's always praising God in heaven at that moment.
It's interesting to me that it was one of the elders who said this to him, and not an angel, not God, not somebody else, but one of the elders, again representing the church, who actually speaks up. So it's somebody representing the church who actually speaks up. And the first thing he says to him, and we're going to get to the rest of it, but the first thing he says to him is, do not weep. Stop weeping. Cut out the weeping. Stop the crying. Get off your knees and get up. Right? Now, do you remember in Scripture any other places where someone said, stop weeping?
Christ at the tomb.
I can't hear you.
The Christ at the tomb.
Christ at Lazarus' tomb, right? What? Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So let's look. I want you to look back a couple places. We're going to look at that one and actually a couple others. Look at Luke chapter 7. Luke chapter 7, verse 11. Luke 7:11. Mine says, now it happened the day after that he went to the city called Nain, and many of his disciples went with him and a large crowd. And when he came near the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And a large crowd from the city was with her. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and he said to her, do not weep. And then he came and touched the open coffin and those who carried him, and he said, young man, I say to you, arise. And so he who was dead sat up and began to speak, and he presented himself to his mother, etc., etc. But you notice here that Jesus says to her, do not weep, stop crying. Look at Luke chapter 8, verse 49. Luke 8:49 says, while he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house, saying to him, your daughter is dead, do not trouble the teacher. But when Jesus heard it, he answered and said to him, do not be afraid, only believe, and she will be made well. When he came to the house, he permitted no one to go in except Peter, James, and John, the father and mother of the girl. Now all wept and mourned for her, but he said, do not weep, she is not dead, but sleeping, etc., etc. And then you know that he raises the girl from the dead here. Finally, in John chapter 12 is where we have him at the tomb of Lazarus. John chapter 12, verse 50. That cannot be right. Oh, I hate when this happens.
Chapter 11, John 11. Is Lazarus raising from the dead?
Yeah, maybe. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, I don't know why I said 50. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, go to chapter 11. Verse, verse 33. You remember the story though. Jesus heard about Jesus was Lazarus was dying. He completes his ministry, and then he comes, and Lazarus has already died. So verse 33, it says, therefore, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he groaned in the spirit and troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? And he said, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. And then the Jews said, see how they loved him. So here we have, yeah, okay, so I'm sorry, I'm just remembering what I'm trying to remember. So first of all, in the first two cases, you have a situation where Jesus tells the people not to weep. Here you have a situation where Jesus wept. So in the first two situations, let's go back to them, where he raised these people from the dead. He tells the people not to weep. Why does he tell them not to weep?
He's gonna resurrect him.
He's got it.
Because he's fixed the situation.
Well, he's about to fix the situation, right? He's about to fix the situation. He's about to do something. He's about to do something pretty dramatic. So he says, stop your weeping. Don't you know that I am about to do something dramatic? Don't you know that I have the power and ability to do something about this situation? Don't you know that I can come in and change the reality of what's going on right now? So that is absolutely the message that he's giving to those folks. Don't weep. There's no reason to weep about this. I am here, and I can do something about this. And then we have the situation here at Lazarus' tomb where it says that Jesus wept, right? So, and then there's one other I want to show you. Go back to Luke chapter, before we talk about that, go back to Luke chapter 19. You remember the other time when Jesus wept? It's in Luke 19. Luke 19:41. So it's actually the triumphal entry. We get to verse 41. It says, and now as he drew near, he saw the city, and he wept over it, saying, if you had known, even you, especially in your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you, enclose you from every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground, and they will not leave you on one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation. So Jesus here weeps over Lazarus, and then he weeps here over Jerusalem. Why is he weeping when he tells these other people not to weep? Why does he weep over Lazarus? Why does he weep over Jerusalem?
over Lazarus because of their unbelief?
Say it again, I can't hear you very well.
Over Lazarus because of their unbelief?
Because of whose unbelief?
Well, his disciples and everyone else.
It's essentially everybody there in the crowd, right? Yes. Okay, keep going.
And over Jerusalem, because he knows what's in store for Jerusalem.
And why is what's in
And
store?
that's how they reject him.
Yeah,
And the results of that rejection.
right. It's because of their sin, right? He's weeping because of their sin. He knows what's going to happen to them because of that sin, but the weeping is about their sins. The weeping is about their unbelief in both cases, right? That because they don't believe, as it said here at the end, right, you did not know the time of your visitation. They didn't believe who he was, and certainly they, he wept not because Lazarus was dead, because he was about to raise him from the dead, right? He wept because they did not believe him. They did not believe who he was. It's the same situation where he's telling the other people not to weep because they don't believe who he was, because they don't understand that he has the power to do something about this. All right, so let's go back to Revelation. Was there another comment?
I was going to say, which is all the more reason the fact that they had seen him raise people from the dead before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right. All right, let's go back to Revelation now. So so he sees John, and one of the elders then steps forward and says, "Do not weep." Why is he telling him not to weep?
Because he has the answer. Which is that Christ is the line
Is
of
worthy.
the open scroll. So
Because again,
because he knew it.
yeah, because again, Jesus is about to do something. Jesus is in the midst. It goes back to your comment earlier. Why did we even have this story, right? Because Jesus is there, right? I mean, I think this is exactly what the elder is saying. Why in the world are you crying? Jesus is here. It's we don't have a situation where there's no one that's worthy and no one that's able. Stop your silly crying. We do have someone, and it's as we'll see, it's Christ, right? I think that's exactly the point that he's trying to make. And again, I would say,
John, John, you're not believing. Yeah.
right.
John's point, you just said no
Say the
one's
exact
worthy.
same thing, that the whole point of the three passages is now the elder is saying the same thing to John. You're not believing. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And so we got to that, Jesus is in the house. Jesus is in the midst. He's going to do something. Stop your silly weeping. And so so make sure you get this to yourself, right? Make sure you make this personal. When it looks like all hell is breaking loose, realize that Jesus is in the house, right? That Jesus can do something about it, that he is worthy and he is able always, right? Don't be weeping. Don't be discouraged. Don't be down. Jesus is in the house. Don't miss that message here, because that's he's trying to give us hope, right? He's trying to give the churches, in chapters 2 and 3, hope about the future, that there is someone worthy. There is someone able to do something about all this. And he's trying to give that message to us also. Got it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now let's look at this person. But to the elders but one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loosen the 7 seals." So these are obviously messianic statements that he's making. Let me just give you the references because of the time, rather than going back and look at them all. So the Lion of the tribe of Judah comes from Genesis 49, verses 8 through 10, where it talks about the Lion of the tribe of Judah. They definitely connected there to the Messiah. I will say up front, this is why the Jews had so much trouble accepting Jesus as the Messiah, because in their heads, he's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's this one coming to destroy and to take over and to be in charge. And they did not understand how this Messiah could be someone who would die on a cross. He was supposed to be this lion, this powerful, strong, and deadly Messiah who would come in. So this is certainly why they gave him, why he had, the Jews had so much trouble. And then the second term he uses is the root of David. This comes from Isaiah 11, verse 1 and following, where it talks about, again, that the Messiah will come out of David's line, the root of David. And there's several references to the root of David in that passage in Isaiah 11. I do want to show you, go to Revelation chapter 22, the end of the book, verse 16. So here you have actually Jesus speaking in verse 16. It says, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things in the churches. I am the root of the offspring of David, the bright and morning star. Excuse me. So here we have Jesus himself saying, you know, I am the root of David. So he's making that identification with him in going back to verse 5. All right. Now, there's a couple other things really important in this verse that you got to get. Now, my translation, I don't like. Mine says, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals. What it sounds like it's saying there is that he has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7. In other words, he has been successful in opening the scroll and loosing the 7 seals. That is not what this verse is saying. What this verse is supposed to be saying is that he has prevailed, comma, and he has opened the scrolls and loosed the 7 seals. In other words, he's not just prevailed to open the scrolls, he's prevailed. He has overcome. He has triumphed. He has won. He's the guy that has won the prize. He's prevailed. He's won it. He's done it. He's triumphed. It's a big statement in the middle of this. Not just that he's able to open the scroll and loosen the seals. He has conquered. He is the overcomer. You remember when we were looking in chapters 2 and 3 at each of the churches, you remember that I'm just looking back at chapter 3 here for a minute. In verse 5, right, it says, he who overcomes shall be clothed. And then in verse 12, he who overcomes, I will make him a pillar. And then in verse 21, to him who overcomes. He kept talking about the overcomers. And we said those were the ones who were saved, right? Those are the ones who believe in Jesus are the overcomers. Well, here he's saying he's the first overcomer, right? He has overcome such that we can overcome, right? He has won. He is the victor. That's a huge message in the middle of this statement here in verse 5, where we are, 5. Now, as a result of that, he can open the scrolls and loose the 7 seals. But the point is that he has overcome. Now, I got to show you this. Look back at Colossians verse 1. It's a wonderful summary of this in Colossians chapter 1, rather. All I got to do is be able to find it. Colossians 1, verse 13. So again, just kind of pointing out the victory that Christ has won here. In verses 13 and 14, it says, he has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of his love, in whom we have redemption through his blood and forgiveness of sin. So he has conquered sin. He has redeemed us through that. Look over at chapter 2 in Colossians, verse 13 also. Chapter 2, verse 13. It says, and you being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven all your trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, nailing it to the cross, having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it. So the point again is, don't miss the point that he is the victor. He has prevailed. He has done this by what he's the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's the root of David, and he's the conqueror. All those things are being said about him right here, and that he's able to open the scroll. Now, trying to figure out what I do that we're over time. But let me just say this about verse 6. And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as though it had been slain, having 7 horns, 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into the earth. So we'll get into the details of this verse next time, but you got to see right up front that he's told it's the Lion of the tribe of Judah, it's the root of David. He turns around and he's expecting to see a lion, right? You got to be, right? There's one who's come, he's the lion. He turns around and he sees a lamb. This is a dramatic point in the story where he turns around and he sees this lamb. And again, he's able to conquer, he's able to be victorious over Satan because he was this lamb, right? That's the reason that he could be the lion and that he could be the root of David, is because he has been this lamb. And we'll get into all the details of that as we get into the rest of verse 6 and then down in verse 9, etc. So there's a lot to be dug out of this, especially as we try to understand who this lamb is and the characteristics that they show here. All right, because we're at time, let's just pause there. I think as we go into Christmas, this is a wonderful picture for us to have in our head. Seeing not only the throne room as we've described in verse 4, but it's interesting in verse 6, as we just looked at, right? He's in the midst of that throne room where there's the 4 living creatures, the elders, the rainbows, the crystal sea, all of that. In the midst of that, all of a sudden, there's this lamb standing there. It's a great picture for us to have in our minds of the reality of heaven. So I do want to give you one homework assignment for you to ponder over the Christmas holidays, and that is, what song did the angels sing in Scripture? What song or songs do the angels sing in Scripture? Go back and see if you can find that, and it'll help us as we try to understand what we're about to see as we get into the worship of God in the rest of chapter 5. All right, so we will hopefully finish up chapter 5 when we get back together. So the next 2 weeks we are off for Christmas and New Year, so have fun with your families. Of course, I'm hoping to see all of you on Friday night. We're going to have a nice party, and I'm looking forward to that. I would ask you, as far as prayer requests, a couple of things. One is we have invited our neighborhood over this afternoon to our house. We don't know most of these people, and as far as I know, most of them are unchurched. So it's an opportunity for us to get to know them and try to develop some relationships and see where that goes. So we'll see how that goes. And then Joe, the kids.
Mm-hmm. We had Julia, we had the 3 granddaughters for a couple of days while their parents went up to the Jefferson for a couple of days. And Julia was just not herself. And it ended up, they took her to the doctor yesterday, and she has strep and tonsillitis. And she's pitiful. And then now Emily this morning has the same symptoms. So their family's going through it. So after having a couple of days off by themselves, they're back into normal family sickness and troubles. So please pray for them.
And of course, they spent the 2 days with us right before they both got sick. So
Well, Julie was sick while she was sick. Get it. Nobody else gets it. Appreciate it.
Anyway, that's bad. So again, we hope to see you all Friday night. If we don't see you, please have a blessed Christmas. and we'll see you after the holidays. Bye now.
Bye-bye.